Now so far we have observed attributes, but these attributes do not really do anything. They simply tell us something about the object. So far we have stored name information and age information, as well as the kingdom to which a dog belongs. But as mentioned at the start of the section, dogs also perform actions. They eat, they sleep, they bark, and so on. Now we can create actions by defining functions inside of our class, just like we did with attributes. And when we do this, we are then able to call these functions by accessing them via the instance that we create. And these are also known as methods that we call. Now the difference between attributes and methods is that when we call a method, we have to put a set of parentheses after we call it. And we've seen this many times when calling methods on lists and other data structures, as well as when we called our own user-defined functions. So as mentioned, instance methods are functions that are defined inside of a class, and they can only be called from an instance of that class. And just like the init method, an instance method's first parameter is always self. So let's dive into two examples of instance methods. First of all, we will define a function called description, and inside of the parentheses, as just mentioned, we will put the parameter self. Now when we call the description method, we simply want to return a sentence telling us the name of the dog and how old the dog is. So after the colon, we will put return, and then we will put in double quotes, curly braces is curly braces years old, and then we will utilize the format method and we'll pass self.name as the first argument and self.age as the second argument. So let's think what this will do. When we call our instance and access the description method, it will populate it with the name attribute that refers to the instance itself and the age attribute of the instance itself and pass it into a sentence. When we run this code and then create a variable called my_dog, and we set this equal to a call on the dog class, and we'll pass in Bruno as the name and 4 as the age. When we now put my_dog and then put dot, you can see that when I press tab, we now have a method that we can call, which we know is called description. So if I call description and then put parentheses after the word description, you can see that we return Bruno is 4 years old. So now whenever we create an instance of the dog class, we're always able to call the description method, which will tell us the name and age of that specific dog. Quite useful. Okay, so let's move on and create a second instance method. We know that dogs can bark, and the barks can sometimes sound a little bit different depending on the dog. So we'll create a new function inside of this class called speak. And the speak function will contain two parameters. The first one we know is the keyword self, which refers to the instance itself when the instance is created. And the second parameter that we're going to include is the sound that that specific dog makes. So we'll put sound as the second parameter. After the colon, we're then going to return another string. But this time we're going to put curly braces, says, and then curly braces. We can then use the format method, and inside the parentheses of the format method, we're going to pass in self.name, which refers to the value that's been assigned to the name attribute for this specific instance, and the second parameter is going to be the variable sound, which is passed in to the speak function. So if I now rerun this class definition, and then rerun the instantiation of the my_dog variable, you can see that when I put my_dog and then place a dot, we can now access a method called speak. And if I access speak, inside parentheses we need to provide an argument which refers to the sound parameter. So I'll simply put woof in single quotes. When I now run this method, you can see that Bruno says woof. Now if we wanted Bruno to make a different sound, let's say Bruno was quite angry, we could put my_dog.speak and pass in yap. When we now run this method, you can see that Bruno says yap. So just like we've seen when we created our own user-defined functions, we can create user-defined functions and place them inside of a class object. We can then access these methods on an instance of that class. Now when you write your own classes, it's a good idea to have a method that returns a string containing useful information about an instance of the class. However, using the method description isn't the most Pythonic way of doing this. There is a better way. For example, if I create a list called my_list and set this equal to 3 values, so we'll put apple, banana, and pear. When I print out what is stored in the my_list variable, you can see that we return a list of the values that we've stored inside the variable. But what happens when we do the same and print my_dog? Now when we do this, you can see that we've got an object which is stored at this location in memory. And it's very hard to interpret, it's not very useful. In fact, if we put my_dog and then placed a dot and press Shift Tab, you can see that we get something called string form, and it's essentially the same message we see when we print out my_dog. Now we're able to change what gets printed by defining a special instance method called dunder_string_dunder. So let me show you how this works. Rather than putting def description, we can replace the word description with dunder_str_dunder. And we can then put self inside parentheses. We can then leave everything else as it is. If I now create an instance called my_dog and set this equal to a call on the dog class with the name Bruno and the age 4, you can see that now when I print out my_dog, we print out Bruno is 4 years old. So we get a much more friendly message when we use the dunder_str_dunder method. And if I look at my_dog, place a dot, and then access the documentation, you can see that the string form has also changed to tell us that Bruno is 4 years old. Now if you haven't already guessed, methods like dunder_init_dunder and dunder_str_dunder are called dunder methods because they begin and end with double underscores. And there are many dunder methods that you can use to customize classes in Python, and we'll visit these in a separate video. So to summarize, we can also create functions inside of a class, and these are known as methods. We can access these methods in the same way that we access attributes, but we have to put parentheses in order to call them. You can have as many defined functions inside of a class as you like, and they can obviously do many different things. In the next part of the section, we will take our OOP knowledge one step further and observe how we can create classes from other classes.